Hi there. I would like to welcome our guests and filmmakers, collaborators of the pretty amazing, fantastic Schwetta Island. Felt like this was such a journey film, got a chance to transport you, enlighten you, give you a little bit of culture with love and a dose of reality check about humanity and how we keep circling these same cycles of prejudice and rebuilding from it and transforming from it into something. And I thought that with that, this film is so incredibly timely and hopeful. And I really appreciate that in this time. So with that, I would like to introduce Dani Rotstein and Felipe Wolokita. Hopefully I've pronounced both of you correctly.
I'll jump in and say it's actually Dani. My father's from Israel, so the
Dani. Oh, great. Dani. Okay.
But
okay.
You got Rotstein right. That okay. Second part was excellent.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and if you can both speak a little bit about your collaboration on Schwetta Island, and for our audiences who've just seen this fantastic documentary.
Sure. So I'll just jump in and say that we are actually two members out of the 3-person directorial team. Myself, Felipe, and Ofer Lazowicki, who couldn't join us today. Ofer is originally from Barcelona in Spain, but spent many years living in Israel as well. And yeah, so he's with us in spirit today during this Q&A. I myself, Dani Rotstein, I'm not from Mallorca, Spain, if you can hear by my New Jersey accent that I've been tirelessly working on for 40 years plus or so. No, I'm from the States, and yeah, I've been living in Mallorca for 7 years and producing and had the great pleasure to be, this is our directorial debut for this documentary, and pass it off to Felipe.
Yes, and hi everyone. Nice to be here. I'm actually from Brazil. I'm from Rio de Janeiro, and I live in Israel right now from 2007. So long time living in Israel. I have my graduation here in filmmaking at Tel Aviv University, and met Ofer, the other one who is not with us today. And together we traveled to Mallorca to meet Dani and to film Schwetta Island.
Yeah, the film has such a particular I could almost say a glow to it, a particular look that's consistent. Was that something aesthetically that you went for? Do you feel like in and of itself, the island just has this sort of radiance, or is that something that a particular look that you went for throughout, the both of you?
No, I think the Mallorca is just amazing. The light is amazing. The landscapes are amazing. The construction, the architecture, everything is very, very beautiful. It was my first time there in Mallorca. So I try to capture this first time look when you're looking for something for the first time, that everything is beautiful. So if I try to print there in the photography, me and Ofer. For Ofer also was the first time in Mallorca. So also have like this enchantment all the time with the places and the persons. That's something that is present. Nice that you note.
I'll just jump in and say that I think Felipe is being rather modest. I think Felipe and Ofer both have a beautiful style of filmmaking and shooting, actually. And so the mixture of, having fixed camera for the interviews, etc., double camera, but then also being on the street and being very fluid, working with like kind of a steady cam equipment piece that we had worked well. Also the drone footage. I personally think that both of them did a really great job, really beautifully capturing all the images in the film.
Agreed. One of the things that stayed with me, I mean, weeks after watching the film, was that you captured the hands, people's hands touching, I forget, was it this, well, just walls in general, but the side of, wasn't there, it was
the Mount Zion Church, which
the Mount Zion
built
Church.
on top of a synagogue. Yeah,
that's correct. And having this connection with it, which there's so many layers to that. What does that feel like, actually? Just the touching of it. I think you did a great job actually showing it and making it as viscerally present for us as an audience. But what does that personally feel like, touching something with that history?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we actually strive to do on our tours, and I think that was, a creative decision that both Felipe and Ofer were specific about. They're like, no, we want to go on tours with both you and Laura, who is the other young historian who is Xueta from Mallorca. And, we kind of planned it that way, that Ofer and Felipe came at a great moment of Mallorca's year, where September, there was like Jewish Culture Month, where we had organized all these different events and activities. And also the City Hall was sponsoring us to do these tours. So on the actual tour, we encourage people to not only touch the walls that we go by, but also write notes and kind of have this experience of, maybe feeling what it would be like to go to the Muro de Lamentaciones, the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. Obviously, it hasn't been like that for centuries. I mean, we just started doing this a couple of years ago, but it is the wall of a church where the synagogue used to stand. So there is this idea of connecting to the past and doing anything you can to connect to the past in a place where it has been so deliberately demolished and extinguished. And that was kind of something we were trying to tease out throughout the film.
Yeah. I it's funny. I was beginning to say that I had had different stints where I lived in Spain and in Madrid specifically, and had traveled around there. And I'm originally from New York. And what always, even from the 2-hour spirited dinners with my Spanish family and all these different things, there always felt like there was this, and often in places, that there were these threads, these layers of Jewish culture that I could feel from New York, but they were sort of in a different shape and format. That there was something alive and very part of what Spain is today that might have been erased, but actually is still very there. I was just wondering, before even coming to this project, when you go to places, or when you went to Spain prior, do you feel pieces of that presence, and how did that hit you? I mean, I remember thinking, I know there's something more. There's something more than Catholic Spain. I just know it, and it's the flavor, and it's, I feel like it's part of I personally fell in love with it. That there was this sort of confluence. But yeah, did you feel that way?
It's fun. It's a great question, Lisa. I did and I didn't, in the sense of, when I went to different Jewish quarters 20 years ago, when I lived in Madrid for a year when I was in college. That was like my first connection to Spain, and loved every second of it. And yeah, I actually specifically went to Cordoba and Toledo and many different cities that are known to have Jewish history. But I always felt it was done in almost like a museum kind of way. Like, here is where the Jews lived, and this is what they did and how they and I was like, I'm Jewish. And you got the vibe that people who were giving the tours even, or people that lived in these towns, had never met someone Jewish before. And that always actually kind of frustrated me. It was like, there's like, there are Jews that live today, like in New York and Israel and all over the world. Like, why isn't Spain with a strong, numerous, Jewish community? Granted, that was 20 years ago. It has changed. There's far more now. There's about 40,000 Jews living in Spain compared to 400,000 living in France. So that's a big old zero right there, it's a difference. And so it's a mixed bag. The fact that the synagogue in Toledo, was converted to a church, and now it's a museum and it's not even being used as a synagogue and it's still owned by the church, feels a little bit like a thorn in the side. It's like, well, why is Toledo one of the most popular places of Jewish heritage around the world, and there's no Jews living in Toledo? It's interesting to think about. So I think depending on what perspective you're coming from, also nowadays, and we're involved with this with Mallorca, we're going to schools, we're doing tours of the Jewish quarter. So there is this interest in Jewish heritage and Muslim heritage as well. That's now finally coming about in modern Spain.
Yeah. And I should say that I also meant like even more so just like culturally, food wise, just all these different aspects that are unspoken. Did you have any of that feeling, Felipe, when you?
Yeah, for sure. It was not my first time in Spain. I was also in Toledo, also in the south, in the Sevilla, in the Granada, and I know a lot of because of my Brazilian background, the Marangos, the Conversos story is very present. Also in my family, I have my mother who recently discovered he has a Marano background. So also I know this story, and it was fascinating to see that it's very present, that is there in the culture, in the people. That's thanks to Dani to bring meaning into the story.
Yeah, exactly. It's the sort of like the bringing of the invisible but very visible that's been sort of fighting to sort of make a presence or just stay present. And
I'd also add, Lisa, that's funny. You mentioned something earlier that kind of resonated with me. You mentioned that the film had a bit of a glow to it, and that's the first anyone has made that comment before. And I wanted to kind of actually just address that and say that this whole process, for me personally speaking, I can't speak for Felipe. I'd love for him to comment. I felt very much guided by an external force, energy of some kind. Like even the way that I even met Felipe. First, I think it's fun for our viewers to know that Felipe and I have only met once in person, and it was during the shoot. We have not seen each other since then, and we didn't know each other before. So that's pretty exciting. And I'll just quickly tell a short anecdote. I think it's interesting for our viewers of how this idea even came about, which was, my wife, Carla, and I, who you saw in the film, started Limud Mallorca, where we do learning conferences and we do different cultural activities. And Ofer, who I had also never met before, was in Israel. He's a journalist, caught wind of our activity, this big conference that we were doing in May of 2018, and 2019, and wrote an article about this conference. We'd never spoken. And then on a trip to Israel to visit family, we happened to be sitting in front of another woman and their baby, and our baby started talking to their baby, and it turns out that this is Oprah's baby. Oprah was in Israel, and his wife Georgina was coming, and so it was kind of like, oh, what are you doing going to Israel? Chit chat, babies, and it was like, we did Limud, and she's like, I think my husband, wrote an article about you, Ofer. I'm like, oh yeah, I know that name. So anyway, that was our connection on a plane to Israel. And then Ofer and I kept speaking, and I invited him to come to, hey, why don't you come and do an article, And he mentioned, he's like, oh, I've camera and I film. We do documentaries as well. And I'm like, oh my God, it's been my dream to do a documentary. And we just kind of, this is all happening, Lisa, within like 2 months, 3 months, such a short window. And Ofer said, I have a really good friend who I work with. I want to bring Felipe in the project. Felipe came in. We did Skype conversations, me telling them about what's happening in Mallorca and you know, letting them know about all the fascinating things that are coming up. Like this September, we're going to be doing all these activities. And we did a crowdfunding, you know, fundraising platform on juicer.org, you know, that raises funds for Jewish projects. We were able to hit our goal, and we and Felipe and Ofer flew out there and filmed this documentary that you saw in 10 days time, nonstop, going from place all over the place. They were running around the island, and we came back with all this material. We're like, okay, great, now what? You know, I know we have something. And so that began the post of you know, transcribing and going through all the footage, which Ofer and Felipe did in Israel. It was unbelievable. And then the pandemic hit, March 2019. I mean, we were in editing mode from afar. Yeah. And pandemic came down. We hired Marta, who is this incredible scriptwriter, and she looked at all the footage and kind of helped us create the narrative arc that you see in the film. And we edited all that through the summer. And yeah, about a year ago is when we would have finished our rough cut. And from then it was making the music for the soundtrack and the animations, and then all the beautiful stuff, bringing more people onto the project to just elevate the film's potential. And so we're so excited that we got here. We got there.
Wow. You know? Very, very, it was meant to be, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty great. And speaking of the arc, you know, I also found it interesting that not only were you following, you know, you have this great ensemble, as it were, of that, you know, particularly, is Michael the jeweler?
Michael.
Yeah, Laura, and all of these people. So you have that, but you also managed to capture conflict, which helps drive the story itself. I mean, were you surprised that even became a part of the story that you were telling? Because it didn't, it's funny, it just comes in gently, and then all of a sudden it's in a great way, it's really present, and it leads you to wonder, okay, now what's gonna happen while I'm trying to learn about Schwetta, and I'm interested in these, you know, these scholar in the ensemble. So yeah, was that a surprise for you, and a delightful surprise? And how did it play out?
Well, I leave it to Felipe, to jump in.
It's not a surprise, actually. We know about what is going on in the community by Dani. Dani is a part of the community. And it was important to us not just to talk about the past and the history, and also about what's happening in the community now, today, with the return of the Xuetas to the community, and to picking the leadership of the community. And what you see there, what you saw there, that was the same conflicts that you know from another Jewish communities in the world. It's a very small community, but the same conflicts that I have in my community in Rio, and I don't know New York because it's huge, but another, other communities, Jewish communities in the world. So it was not a surprise. We wanted to pick this conflict to bring something updated to the story, something from today.
Oh, excellent.
I would add as a person within the community and totally part of the conflict, this was not necessarily, at least from my perspective, like a cinematic piece. There was a couple objectives with this film. One was, of course, to let people know about, this word up there, Xueta, and what that word means, and get that word out there, and that history out there, but also like on a very selfish, like investigative reason, like Ofer is a journalist. And so it was so clear, important for me to describe to Felipe and Ofer all the many different moving parts of the community. All right, you have this guy who's, very, very religious. And then you have this one who's very more laid back, and this one who's more into history. And, as a community leader and organizer, I was curious to know what the past president of the community thought about what we're doing, what the current president thought about egalitarian, there's actually, I think, a line that perhaps didn't even make the film, Felipe, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was in our first trailer where the current president says, like, this community is Orthodox, and that means that whenever you're inside the synagogue, we'll be doing things Orthodox. If there's a group of Reformed Jews that want to go ahead and create their synagogue, well, this is a free country. Like, it was kind of like putting it out there. And I think he was referencing myself and a couple of our other friends. And so what you may or may not know is that, you probably don't know, because you never see behind the camera, only what's being shown. I was not, it was a creative decision on our team to make sure that I did not want to be personally at these interviews. It was only Ofer and Felipe who were conducting the interviews, because I didn't want to compromise, their vulnerability or their basically their tachlis, like to not feel like I wanted them to feel like they could be completely open with two Israeli filmmakers who came in, to learn a little bit about the community.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That was a really, really wise strategy, like, and thoughtful, to just, allow everybody to just speak and have that flow. That's in
their own language too. Very important that they should feel comfortable speaking in Catalan, in Spanish, in English, what have you. So
what's needed. Yes. I also did think that, I don't know if you wrote it or the person who shaped the story who you mentioned, but I also found that the narration, which sometimes I'm not a fan of, sometimes I'm a fan of. I go back and forth, but I really found that it helped carry us through as an audience, and sort of, like that we're surveying and on tour with you in general. And just wanted to maybe talk a little bit about, like, how long that took, you're recording it, how what the feeling was throughout.
Well, I'll let Felipe respond about the mere fact about using myself as the conductor, because that was not
the conductor. Yes, because it was something that we are thinking about, how to tell the story, and we just found out that Dan is the best conductor to the story. It was for us to understand the story and to tell the story. Also, it makes sense because he's present, have connections with everyone. About the voiceover and the narration, also we thought that it will help to tell the story and to make clear some points, to not lose information in the way.
Yeah, and I cannot take credit. That was Marta doing the writing 100% in Spanish. I can take a little bit of credit for translating it into my own words in English, but that's about as far as I go. That was really well written, incredibly written by Marta, to help, as Felipe said, just kind of guide us from part of the film to another part of the film, from scene to scene.
Yes. And with so many Jews have, like, with all that people are sort of attempting to come to terms with and address, with so many Jewish populations having to go underground from persecution for these years and decades and centuries. I'm just curious if you notice now where, there's a celebration here or there, in Europe and in Spain, sort of trying to acknowledge Jewish culture. Do you feel like, have either of you witnessed that those things bring some sort of sense of reconciliation, reparation? Is it more complicated than that? I mean, particularly with the rise of anti-Semitism, I'm just curious of all the layers, because you're in this, seems like you're in something that's trying to reconcile. And what do you notice that's happening around, I guess, in Europe or where you reside? and maybe how this fits into that.
I don't know, Felipe, if you noticed anything you wanted to comment on.
No, just the fact that the municipality of Mallorca is making a Rosh Hashanah event is like funding or helping with a Rosh Hashanah event, like having the movie. I think it's like a way to try to reparate and to recognize the past. So I don't know if I understand the question, but I think like it's a sign that we can talk openly, talk about it, and the people understand what's the horrible facts that we had in the past. So I think you have like a sparkling of a start of a reparation.
Yeah, I would have to, I agree with you. I from what I've seen living in Spain myself, you know, this is the Inquisition was only abolished in 1834. It's not that long ago. You know, and also, if I'm not mistaken, the expulsion of the Jews from Spain, again, the exact date I don't know, but I think that was even taken out of the Constitution like in 1975 or something, like right around when Franco, the dictator, died, you know? And so this is all very recent, this finally coming to terms with this dark history. And yeah, they're putting up memorials, doing tours, and we can't forget the obvious, Spain and Portugal has offered citizenship to people who can prove that they have Sephardic last names, which is very, very complicated, and it's not an easy process. And Spain actually only opened it for about, I think, 4 or 5 years, and then they closed it. I think they had so many applications from Venezuela, from Ecuador, from Colombia, from many Latin American countries, Brazil, for Portugal, of course, and so it was there's a couple articles that came out recently about like how not to do reparations. You know, you don't open it up and then have people pay money to go for a citizenship and then reject them, but keep their money. It's like, it's like adding insult to injury.
Smart way of reparation.
Smart way. So I think there's a desire, but I don't know if it's necessarily being done correctly. The other thing within the Jewish communities of Spain, I kind of actually wanted to highlight this. I think it's fascinating for our listeners or viewers to hear this, that Spain, I think, is finally poised after centuries of discrimination and persecution, especially with the situation of the Xuetas, to have this kind of renaissance of Jewish revival, if you will. And what I find is happening, this is so interesting, that Chabad is now in Madrid and Barcelona and many other places in Spain and becoming very popular. Many Israelis who are living in those cities will go to Chabad. There are a movement in Spain that I see from afar as taking off. And actually, interestingly enough, progressive or reform or liberal Judaism as well. It's fascinating that some people with Jewish roots or not, who are just attracted to Judaism, want to convert, won't do it with the Orthodox communities or the even Sephardic or Moroccan communities, because it's so complicated. And so you have to jump through so many, it's a difficult process. It's not an easy thing. So they convert perhaps on a different, with the egalitarian community, with progressive whatnot. And then when they go back to their towns, Valencia, Alicante, whatever, and there's only an Orthodox shul, they're not accepted there because they converted with the Reform Judaism or Masorti. So they're like, okay, since I just converted this way and I'm not accepted in this traditional community, I'm going to go start my own. So many reform and conservative communities are starting now in different cities all over Spain by people who just converted to Judaism, or returned.
Wow, that's interesting. Really,
it's a phenomenon in my opinion, and I love it. It's like I just found what I really connect to and what excites me, and I'm going to go help others find it as well. And so it kind of breaks the whole mold of this idea of sangre judía, you're only Jewish if you come from your mother's line and if you can prove it and all this thing. It's really breaking a lot of those stereotypes now, and something that I think is worth people looking into and investigating more of. And so I'm so happy that we can only hope that this documentary opens the door for people to explore more about the Jewish Renaissance that I think is poised to happen in Spain right now.
Exactly. I actually think that that's a perfect quote and sentiment from each of you to and on. This really, this movie, may it do all of that and more, and keep pointing itself beyond itself even to other cultures who sort of, can mirror and see itself in this film. And so thank you. And thank you to your third collaborator, well, all of your collaborators who are not here, and to the ensemble, the scholars that lent themselves to you as well. And for taking us through those glowing, radiant, beautiful streets and the warmth of it all. I think it's super inviting. And what happened with the community center?
Well, again, this documentary is hopefully gonna be a beacon, like the guns that you go on your boats, the signals that go up,
Yes.
So from your mouth to up above, we hope that the community center will be built in the next 5+ years or so, and we feel strongly about it. We think it has every right to. And look, the fact that Xueta Island, a small island, a small Jewish community, a small story, is so, we're so humbled to be accepted and selected by the New York Jewish Film Festival. What an incredible privilege to be with you all. We hope that the Mallorca Jewish community can grow and be as large as the New York Jewish community one day in the future. So
awesome.
That's the dream.
Awesome. Well, the New York Jewish Film Festival is really, really proud and so thankful and grateful that you shared your film with us. And it's a delight and one of our gems. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.